Hello and welcome everyone, I'm C.S.Gilmore, and this day we're going to be talking about the Warhammer 40k book, Dominion Genesis, by Jonathan D. Beer. This is a Mechanicus book, and it's kind of interesting, it's on the newer end, I believe. It's got some fun stuff in it. Sometimes especially when it comes to say Mechanicus, it can get a little boggled down in say technicalities and everything because they're the mechanical people. But this one does a pretty good job of having an interesting story. Keep going. It was actually a pretty good read. The general layout is the main character is explorator Talon Sharex, and their world, Griffon 4, one of those, the pride of, second only to Mars type of situations. Like, basically big Forge world type deal. Pretty big deal all in all. Is dead. Because, well, it isn't dead at the start of the book, but before very long into it, it is. Because part of Hive Fleet Leviathan ate it. Despite the Mechanicus having a very large defensive force, lots of ships and everything, Hive Fleet Leviathan had too much for them to stop, and they couldn't hold it. And Talon Sharex, along with some others who were in the fleet, basically grabbed a few survivors off the planet and were told to get out of there. You can't win this fight, go. And yeah, watching your world get devoured by a bunch of giant bugs and having to abandon it, not great. Not good for your morale and general mood. Anyway, they flee to another world where they basically become refugees. But Sharex deals with her depression and PTSD and all that a bit differently than a lot of her compatriots. Some of the other Magoses and whatnot, kind of live in denial. They create a neosphere replica of a bunch of the stuff from their planet, and basically spend their time in there and kind of just don't point out that it's a replica of what we lost. We'll keep working, even though everything's falling apart around us because we no longer have a planet to base our power behind, and yeah, we're no longer in charge, really, of much of anything. Anyway, Sharex, being an explorator, decides, screw you, I'm going to be an explorator and find some way to deal with this. And she goes out and tries to hunt down some old archaeotech to help. And doing this, she comes across references to someone's theories that life could be created. One of those creation myth type deals. And how there might be some truth to some of these. Something that she's going to hunt down. This Magos that had presented this theory had apparently disappeared over time at some point. And through a lot of study and search and everything over several years, she eventually finds a Space Hulk. And in that Space Hulk, she finds the ship of this Magos. It presented this theory of life being able to be created. And they go in and they have worked through the ship. It's been mostly cleared already of orcs and everything by various planetary forces that were trying to stop the Space Hulk in general. As you do, because Space Hulks are a problem, usually because of their generally containing a whole bunch of bad stuff like orcs, gene stealers, several other Xenos messes, and who knows what else, and possibly warp shenanigans that want to kill you. Anyway, she leads her group in and she finds the ship. Now, tensions between her and her crew are a bit high throughout this entire story. Part of that is because after the destruction of her world and the trauma of all that, she has retreated from ever using the Neosphere and being connected to her crew that way, because the Neosphere kind of connects them all, more or less. She's retreated from using that because of her trauma and not wanting to share that with the crew and reveal her weakness to the crew, even though it's causing all sorts of other problems. She's kind of been in denial of her own in some ways. Anyway, they go onto the ship and they find a bunch of mutants that venerate the machine god, and turns out these mutants are descendants of the original crew of the ship. And because these mutants worship the Omnissiah, they go and kind of worship these guys. And they lead them through the ship, and they get brought to something very interesting. The bridge of the ship has been taken over by a tree, but not just any tree. It seems to be a straight up tree, like creating breathable atmosphere and junk like that. But it's a tree made of metal and growing out of like the cogitators and everything else on the bridge, the deck platings, everything else there. So it's not your normal tree, but it's working like one, like a perfectly living tree. And there's this weird, blobby, like bloated thing, which they realize is the Magos that had presented those theories about the life creation and stuff. And turns out he'd had some success. And he might be a little bit on the crazy side. He was still alive, and at least able to communicate loosely. It took a little bit because he wasn't used to talking to people after so long. And who knows how many warp shenanigans he'd gone through being on a Space Hulk, jumping through the warp and all that, being what it is, probably somewhat unprotected. Anyhow, negotiations don't go great. They end up killing him. One of them plugs into the cogitator, or plugs into him. I forget what exactly, but they download some data as to where he got this stuff, because there's this weird glowy red gem shard that is giving off radiation level of some unknown type of radiation, which seems to be the cause of all of this. And they take it and contain it, and then now there's all sorts of, is this archaeotech? Is this some Xenos thing? Is this tech heresy? It has the potential that it could save our planet, though, if we can figure out where it came from and how to use it. And they go and they leave and they take it back to where everyone's been hiding out. They go into a Neosphoric council, basically, and present their findings and want to go and figure it out and find out where it came from and get more stuff there. And that doesn't go well, because where the guy got it from is a sector that is basically listed as a no-go zone. You don't go there, it's banned. you don't do it, because several other explorators and fleets and everything have gone to that place and not come back, and no one knows why. So it says that don't do that type of place. Well, the explorator, of course, doesn't listen because she's adamant this is the best way to save her, restore her world and everything else, and the other people are a bunch of idiots living in a fantasy neosphoric dream of their old world and can't need to accept reality, that they need to move on and deal with it and try to rebuild rather than just pretend that it didn't happen. And so she breaks away and goes and might be a heretic. Somewhat at that point, or more or less excommunicated, because she just stormed out of the council and cut connections to them and refused to let them stop her. Now, we get some bits here. We also know that the Eldar are involved. We get some viewpoints there because they get a little bit of one of them showing up at the place where they got the shard from after they've already left, just a little bit after they already left, and he's trying to hunt down that shard. That's already a good hint that things aren't where they should be, and yeah. They go on. They go to the place they aren't supposed to go with their explorer ship. Just their ship, one ship. They didn't get much of the help they wanted. Anyway, and they find a place that, all its own, is already an amazing find. Because all those fleets and everything that went missing over the years, yeah, they're drifting as rubble and wrecks and whatnot above one of the planets in the system. That's pretty weird. Most people would probably see that and go, maybe we shouldn't get near that. They don't listen, of course. Why would they do that? That would be smart. Even though, finding out that was already a huge find, because if they can find a way to salvage even a quarter of what's floating around that planet, they could build so many things. I think, I can't remember if there was an Arc Mechanicus there or something. I don't recall all the details, but there was a lot there of old tech, old ships, lost ships, things that you probably can't easily replace, and it would be better to, salvage and rebuild. That would be great. But, instead of just leaving and telling and going, hey, we found this here and we're back, and we might want to send a salvage team here, they decide to go in. And they go above the planet. They scan the place, and they have some idea of what they're looking for because they've got the shard and they kind of look for that weird energy signature it gives off. And they find a place. It is kind of hard to find, but they've managed to pick out amidst all this interference. This planet's a wreck, by the way. It's a nuclear. It's a death world. It's been blasted, nuked, possibly something else. It's all bad. But they go down. They take some of their people. They take a shuttle. They go down, leaving another explorator guy, higher rank, in charge of the ship. They land on the planet, and they find out where the signature's coming from, and they discover some things that, what was her name? Sherex? Yeah. Talon Sherex. Ends up kind of being a bit of, well, great. This might be Xenotech. But I'm going to try to be in denial about this as much as I can, because I really don't want to give up on this sliver of hope. Because what they find is, well, it appears to be an abandoned Eldar settlement. But not just any Eldar settlement. This appears to be a place where there's a bunch of grave markers. It's basically a cemetery, Eldar grave world. I don't know what else. I can't remember what they called it exactly, but yeah, it's a place where it's like a bunch of memorials and stuff for all the fallen, and tells stories of how they died and things like that. And there's a central spire thing where the signature seems to be coming from. And they go in there and they find a bunch of murals, and they're trying to decipher them and figure things out and find out. And it seems to be a creation story of some gift from the the things that created the Eldar, the old not the Necron Star Gods, the great old ones, I think is what they were usually referred to as. Anyway, some creation device that literally, like something that can literally create worlds and terraform worlds, create life, and then the Eldar show up. And they have a bit of a conversation discussing things. And it's like, yeah. And as usually goes with these sort of things, they get some info, and then they diplomacy breaks down. They don't want to work with the Eldar. The Eldar wants this stuff, wants that shard. A bunch of Eldar just pop in from wherever because Eldar are sneaky like that and have teleportation tech that is way better than anything the Imperium generally has. And and also better stealth cloaking in general. And a massive fight breaks out. Amongst this crew of the Explorator's crew, besides a bunch of Magoses and tech priests and their Skitari forces and whatnot, they also have a guard regiment. Well, part of one. Basically survivors they pulled off the planet. They were fighting the Tyranids there, and then they pulled them off the planet. They also have one really not happy Titan pilot who is running an Armiger, beat up Armiger. And he's a very upset man because he gets upset when everyone calls him sir, whatever, because he doesn't feel worthy. Because while being a Titan pilot, one of your things is you die with your Titan, right? He survived his Titan. He used to run like an Emperor class Titan or something big, and it died fighting the Tyranids on the world, and they pulled him out of the wreck, and saved his life. But and then dragged him off because he was too injured to say, no, let me die here with my Titan, as it died with it and everything. And so he's got issues, and he's also a pompous pain in the butt that few people like because he's got to stick up his butt. Titan princeps tend to have issues like that, of the I'm better than you type of deal. But he's learning to be a little more less of that throughout the story. And just like our main character is starting to learn, maybe I really actually should open up to my crew and talk to them and not just separate myself and annex myself from everyone in my depression and make them and push them beyond their limits to try to chase after something that I insist they be chased after, and that they're following me mostly because I'm the one in charge. And they feel like they probably should still follow me for whatever reason. Anyhow, things go bad. Big fight with the Eldar. Their shuttles get slagged. And they see a big kaboom up in space and are thinking, great, our ship just got nuked. It just got blown up because the Eldar had a ship hidden up there. Or multiple ships, I forget exactly. At least one ship. Anyway, they fight the Eldar off. But they're still trapped on this death world. And I'm talking like acid rain. The water's acid. There's no food. They have to use rebreathers to breathe it all, junk like that. And they're trapped now because their shells got blown up in the Eldar fight. And they think probably the ship did too. But they had some knowledge of general things in the area, and there was one wreck on the planet from a ship that had landed, that was moderately intact still. It was several days away from them, but it was their best hope, so they made for that. And they find out on their trip over, while they're dealing with their wounded, having a lot of them die on the way, and also trying to deal with the fact that water is all super acidic, but they also still have to drink something or they're going to die one way or the other. And yeah, all sorts of problems. They also find out that there is actually life on this planet, not just the Eldar. I'm talking like there's animal life. Unfortunately, that animal life is groks. Now, groks are usually moderately docile, giant lizard things that people like to eat, kind of like cows. You get a grok steak. Well, these groks have gone feral, are much more aggressive, and have kind of mutated a bit to adapt to the planet. And yeah, they're very not friendly and start picking off people in their convoys because, the groks are going to eat whatever they can get hold of. And yeah, so they lose some people to that. They finally get to the ship, find out that it was an old Astartes ship. It had crash landed on this planet as well. Big hint here should have been that, yeah, maybe this planet wasn't safe in the first place, considering all the ships there crashed in orbit, dead around it, or crashed onto the planet, which this ship is pretty much, it's permanently grounded, because it's one of those big ships, and the big ships are never meant to actually go into atmosphere. And when they get to that point, they usually crash to the ground and they're stuck there forever, because even if you could patch them up, you can't get them back into space. But they do find, out of all of everything on this ship, like, they find out that, there were some Astartes that survived the crash, but are dead now. It looks like some of the mortal crew had also survived, and at some point, probably due to hunger and everything, had mutinied and killed the Astartes through sheer numbers. And yeah, so everyone on the ship is dead. But amongst all the wreckage, they find one thing that might save them. One slightly salvageable Thunderhawk, which Astartes ships are not known for their aerodynamics. It's basically a brick, a giant metal brick or cargo container that, with some steering and gun weapons attached to it, and that flies through sheer force of propulsion. Well, all the other Thunderhawks on this vessel are wrecked and ruined. They popped out of the moorings, crashed into things, broke. This one somehow managed to barely stay in the moorings, and it's thankfully pointing towards the hangar exit, which is open, or they are able to pry it open. I forget, but anyway, basically, it's already pointing in the direction they need to go, which is good because the equipment isn't really great there. They finagle some, even though they're exhausted and barely hanging in there, supplies are running out. They're not doing great. They finagle some cranes and things together, do some hasty work on this shuttle to try to work out how to get refueled as well as they can, and from the broken tanks in the area, and also to remove any excess weight. So like any excess armor plating, the guns, everything else, take it all off. Basically doing everything they can to get this thing, make sure it's airtight and can get into space. And as long as it has working thrusters. They take off, fly into space, and try not to dive to the debris field surrounding them and all that. They actually manage to get into space, and then they find out our ship's still up here. It's not doing good though. They can barely its communications aren't doing so hot. Like, a lot of it's broken. Things are bad. Yeah, but they managed to find out, hey, there's still some people alive up here. The ship's mostly crippled, but which is why it's still there, and had contacted them or sent anyone to pick them up, because it had suffered extreme battle damage with the Eldar, and yeah. But they get on the ship, so they manage to survive that, get some rest, healing, medical attention, all that from what little they can, and they patch up some. And once again, instead of just going back and going to accept their defeat at how well the thing we were after was Xenotech, and by the way, the Eldar's got the shard from, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Instead of going back to the council and going, well, it was Xenotech, we lost it, and nearly lost ourselves in our ship, but to the Eldar attack. But hey, we found out that there is a smorgasbord of salvageable stuff here, and now that the Eldar have gone off somewhere else, we could probably get away with salvaging it. Because the Eldar weren't doing great either. We gave them some major damage. Anyhow, yeah, so if we work at it, we could possibly salvage a bunch of that. No, they don't do that. She insists that they go after the Eldar, following the info they got as to. So the info they had gotten from down there at the Eldar settlement, and they find that. So they do. They follow in a mostly crippled ship. It can basically do almost. It barely manages to enter the warp and exit the warp, and it can't fight. It was suffered extreme damage. One of their gun batteries had like blown up and taken a large chunk of the ship with it. They're basically flying an almost an almost dead ship. They barely managed to get life support and transport working up enough to travel. But they go after them, and they end up in another system, and they find some interesting things going on. Primarily, the Eldar are fighting someone. It's not Imperial. They're fighting Necrons. And there's this really ginormous ship, giant ship device, cradling a planet that is getting terraformed, kind of. It's like half of it's a molten volcano area, and half of it's a lush jungle. So obviously the ship is this creation device that was given to the Eldar by the Great Old Ones that is capable of creating habitable planets. But it's got some damage to it, I guess, which is why the Eldar were after that shard, because it's part of the device, and they were trying to get back to replace it. So because they want to rebuild their worlds, of course, too, because the Eldar, they're an empire in ruin that's falling apart, and they're trying to save themselves also. And the Necrons, of course, are the ancient enemy of the Eldar, and they're here to just cause trouble. The Necrons don't really get fleshed out very well in this book. We don't learn a ton about why they're there, their reasoning, or anything like that. But anyway, the Mechanicus decide, let's not fight them. We can't fight them anyway. Let's just try to avoid detection and go for the big giant device. And at this point, some of them are still thinking we could take this device. We could restore our world. We could do all sorts of things. And some of them are basically going, this is a giant Xenotech thing. We have to destroy this. We can't use it, even if we could learn some things from it. But they go on, they decide we have to take a closer look anyway. We have to do something about this. They're going closer, and they get some ships chasing after them. So their ship can't do anything other than basically just keep running. But they go by this big ship, and turns out their ship has a working teleporter. Didn't know about that before, but they do. They have a working teleporter. So Sharex and some of the others teleport down into this ship, into a big biome dome, and they're following the some signature stuff of the device from that weird radiation to try to find out where they need to go to get to the core of this thing. And they find out that the Necrons are already here. They're in here for whatever reason, and yeah. Thankfully, the only Necrons they really run into right now are the basic soldiers. They don't really think for themselves, and they don't seem to be on orders to kill everyone on site right now. Not sure if that showed up on the camera or not. That my screen just blanked for a second there. Right. Anyway. Yeah. So they find out that there are Necrons here, and they're trying to deal with avoiding them and everything else as well as they can as they go deeper into this vessel. And the Eldar start showing up and trying to pick them off by portaling in and attacking. But then they lose some people to that, but they also are defending themselves, and also the Eldar are having a harder time with things because the Necrons do react to the Eldar popping in and start killing them off. And anyway, there's a big fight over. Basically, the Eldar want to reclaim the device. The Mechanicus are interested in this device, and they're kind of coming to. Some of them are coming to the conclusion, including Sharax, that we have to blow this thing up. There are some that don't want to blow it up and want to use it, being very heretical in that regard. Namely, one of the primary Maguses that had helped her find the shard in the first place through some records, who is a bother. I forget his discipline. One of the ones that studies more like living things. So you can understand his interest in the device, being able to create life and all that. Anyhow, they go and more fighting, Eldar fighting. They end up. I forget exactly how this wraps up now. I believe they find some of them end up injured or dying. They end up leaving the one tech priest who wants to use the device behind, or killing him. I think they leave him behind dying, and they decide to blow the place up. Because, no one can have nice things in Warhammer. That would be a no-no. No one can have nice things that might possibly save the universe at some point. And, yeah. Let me see if... I'm trying to remember something here. And, by the way, the name of the book being Dominion Genesis is because this device is called that. This giant world terraforming device, ship thing, is called Dominion Genesis, roughly in the translation to Gothic. But yeah, they get into a fight with the Eldar again, and also the Necrons are causing trouble, and but they end up coming out moderately victorious in this fight here while their ship is out in space and is going to make a swing back to grab them if they can, teleportation wise. Let me see. I forget how they blow it up. Let me just skim through here real quick and find that. But because their ship isn't in shape to really blow up anything. But they managed to get teleported back out. Doo-doo. Da-da-da. Oh, that's right. I forgot. They blow it up by doing so generally warp travel. You go to the outer edge of the system and where there aren't gravity interferences and junk like that, so you can open a rift to the warp and transport without much issues. They destroy this device by, as they're flying by, they teleport back to their ship And then they open up a warp portal to get out of there. While they're very much in system, right next to this device, gravity wells all over, and so that causes a giant warp rift issue, as well as behind them as they enter the warp. They also cause a big warp rift that tears apart a bunch of stuff, and so that's how they destroy the Dominion Genesis. Not a bad way to do it, I suppose. Probably a bit desperate and not recommended, but yeah. So then they go on. And it's like, okay, we will have to find a better way to a proper way to press on with life, move on, either from our forged world that we can't restore, or find a different way to restore it that is not heretical xenotech. But they go on with life, basically. And it's kind of about overcoming your grief, moving on, getting past the stages of grief and denial and all that junk, and learning to work together, and you're not alone dealing with your grief. Yeah, broken beyond recovery, the Genesis vessel began to slowly fall towards the half-made world. The void. Chapel scenes, blah blah blah. They're going through things. And it ends with these lines. Nevertheless, I know this to be true. At our center, we who worship the Omnissiah are not explorers, nor scientists, priests, archivists, or warriors. We are builders. We can rebuild. So, yeah. Basically, the conclusion Sherix comes to is, I've been going about this wrong. I've been trying to rely on old xenotech or archaeotech, just some slim hope of finding a way to restore our world, when I should have been focusing on just rebuilding it the hard way. And yeah. And that's kind of where that book ends. It was a good book. I liked it. Was it perfect? I would say some of it felt a little like it could use work. In regards to the Necrons were very not fleshed out here, other than that they were just there because they maybe were interested in the device, or at least stopping the Eldar from having it. The Eldar probably could have negotiated better, but it's the Eldar. They're not really good at negotiating with other races, it feels like, a lot of the time. They really need to work on that. And, of course, they were dealing with the Mechanicus, who are religious zealots, and Xenotech. So, yeah. But, all in all, it was a pretty decent book. I enjoyed it. I would say it's worth reading. I don't think it quite makes it into my top 10 type of range. Like, it's not a favorite, but it wasn't bad. It was in the good book category, but not in a favorite category. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good synopsis of the book. And yeah, a lot of the nitty gritty, everything. Once again, read the book, you'll get it. It was worth reading, I would say, and yeah. So, anything else I should cover about it? I can't think of anything else. With that, good work, Jonathan D. Beer. I'm not familiar with your. I don't know if you've written anything else. I may have to look into that, just because this was well enough written. I may have to, see if he's got anything else to look into, and how those have gone. Actually, let me just see if the book itself will tell me anything about Jonathan D. Beer. Anything else you've written? Where's the author bit? About the author. Where are you? Where are you? Usually it's either at the front or the back. Jonathan D. Beer is a science fiction and alternative history writer, equally obsessed with the 19th century and the 41st millennium. He lives with his wife, has hoarded cats in the untamed wilderness of Edinburgh, Scotland. Cool. He's the author of the Warhammer novel Dominion Genesis has also written the Warhammer crime stories Old Instincts, Service and Chains, as well as the novel The King of the Spoil. Oh, I forgot he wrote that one. King of the Spoil. That's another one I've read. Actually, pretty decent. I should probably talk about that at some point in the future. Not right now, though. All right. Which one do I want to talk about next? I think I want to talk about the Bookkeeper's Skull next, or Silent Hunters. I haven't quite decided. But one of those probably next. But for now, I need to wrap this up. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Comments below. Favorite parts of the story if yourself if you read it. Least favorite parts. What did you think? Like, what is your thought on the story? Cool's idea with the big world transforming ship. Kind of wonder how that. I guess it's a big galaxy. Is you could always play as how that was not found before. But yeah, you think more of the Elder than like a single small group of them would have been interested in restoring this device and reclaiming it? But apparently, I don't know, issues. But for now, that should do it for now. Yeah. So good night, everyone. Being late here. Hit like and subscribe if you're new here and haven't done so to keep up with new releases. And good night. Bye.